All righty, I'm here with Jason Schifrin for a brand new episode podcast of the Unlikely Agent Podcast. Jason
All right.
Yeah, I know. Jason Schifrin, how you doing, buddy?
Pretty good, Ben. How are you?
Awesome, buddy. Yeah, thank you so much for having you on. I've been trying to get you on. I know that you had some travel arrangements that kind of interfered, got in the way.
Yeah. I was in New York. I was in Chicago. My summer vacation this year was sponsored by Weddings. Well, I guess not sponsored, but brought to you by Weddings. We had just a couple weddings to go to, so we made a trip out of it.
Nice. So you went to New York and Chicago?
Yeah, actually flipped that order. But yeah, we went to Chicago, then New York. It was nice. I'm from New York, so it was cool seeing family and friends and, showing my wife where I grew up for really the first time. We'd been to New York before, but never Long Island, never the suburbs. So
awesome.
It's cool to show her that.
Very cool. Yeah, nice. You were gone just for a couple of weeks, but it didn't really seem to interfere with business too much.
No, not at all. I mean, I always joke, like, I'm fortunate that I met my wife and I was already in real estate. So, I mean, there's no such thing as a vacation when you're in this business.
Right.
Everything is always a working vacation.
Yeah, you nailed that. And for those that don't know, Jason Schifrin is on the Roland Team. He is our sales manager. You've been with us for how long? Year and a half, 2 years?
Yeah, coming up on 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah.
Time flies, man.
Yeah, I know, right?
So you came in just as a kind of regular agent initially. I know that we interviewed, kind of interesting story, so let's talk about it. Where like initially we had to sit down, talked about potentially joining the team. At that time, you decided to pass, just wasn't a good fit, or just, I don't know, it didn't make sense at the time?
Yeah, it didn't make sense at the time, but it was always just something like in the back of my head. I kept thinking like, I should have done it. It's interesting. Like I started my career as a solo agent, then I worked for a builder, then I was on a team, and then I went back to being a solo agent. So, I wasn't happy with my production. I mean, probably most people would have looked at my production and been like, why aren't you happy? But I'm not okay with, 1 to 2 deals a month. I'm sure a lot of people are, but I want, 2, 3, 4, 5 deals a month if I can. And, I saw what you were doing. I was always at your company anyway, just not on the team. And I saw what you were doing. We spoke, and I don't know, I guess going backwards, I felt, going from a solo agent back to a team was like a step backwards. So I think I kind of had to get over that a little bit in my head as well.
Totally. Yeah. And I interview agents often and they kind of have the same thing. I totally get it too. It really boils down to what you had said. Like, I didn't want to just do, 1 to 2 deals a month. If you are an agent that's happier with doing that type of production, ultimately that's your decision. If you're happy, if that's your quality of life that you're seeking, knock yourself out. The people that I find that do well under our team are the ones that are hungry, that want to do more. They don't want to do 1 or 2. They want to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 a month.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of something that the team can offer, as far as just eliminating a lot of the overhead, the marketing, and just puts people like you in a position to talk to buyers and sellers consistently. So it's been awesome. It's been a cool marriage since you joined the team.
Yeah.
You've rised up the ranks quite a bit from just like regular agent. Now you are, as mentioned, our sales manager. So you're one of our mentors, you and Amber Holiday. How many mentors do you have now?
We have, I think we're like 4 or 5. We got a couple that'll be graduating soon. I think just about all of them have like at least one in contract right now. A bunch of them have buyers in the car. Some of them even have some listings. It's really cool to see. There were definitely some growing pains at first as we were building out that mentorship program and really writing the program. But it's been really cool to see. It's like, I mean, I don't have kids, but it's like my baby.
No, it's been the highlight of the year. Absolutely, 100% sure. The mentorship, just everything about it, how it's evolved. You and Amber have done a phenomenal job, and it is. I sometimes because we have a group text with all the mentees and stuff like that, and sometimes I'll see their progress or I'll just check and see where they're at, and it's like it gives me goosebumps because I know how tough it is the first 6 months to a year. Yeah, and all of them are just doing so dang good. Like they're performing at a high level. And like you said, not only escrows, but they've got buyers in the car, they've got listings, and they just got killer work ethic. So it's been really fun. Walk me through the challenges because I mean, like you said, like the mentorship program in itself has been like super challenging. Were there any like challenges that you did not foresee that you're dealing with consistently that's kind of, we're working through? Sort of.
I mean, I guess sometimes I take for granted that I've been doing this for almost 9 years now in real estate. So I guess I sometimes take for granted that since I've been doing this for as long as I have been, a lot of the things that I'm doing are habit for me. But when you get a brand new agent who's just out of real estate school or maybe only done 1 or 2 deals like total in their career, but they've had their license for a little bit and they're looking for more, teaching them, the scheduling and that work ethic and everything, and then not understanding why they're not hitting those metrics And you're like, why aren't you hitting this? I'm working 11 hours a day. What do you mean you've never worked 11 hours a day before? So it's kind of getting over that hump a little bit, but it's been really cool to see.
Definitely. I completely understand that plight because you definitely hold, you have a standard for yourself. I know you work really hard and put a lot of hours in. And sometimes you find somebody, and it's hard because especially when they're newer, they're trying to get it figured out. The schedule isn't something that you just dive into and automatically.
And they're not getting paid.
Right.
Right.
And then these are interesting.
That's the big thing. It's hey, I have all these expectations for you. And by the way, you're not going to get paid until about 30 days after you get your first transaction. And it might take 2 or 3 months until we actually get you one. So.
Yeah. And we're not there when they get home and, they're eating dinner with their spouse and family. And, they're hearing it from them too. What are they doing? They got you doing open houses. They got you calling all these. When are you going to start making money?
Right.
And that's got to weigh heavy on them. And, we don't get to see that, obviously, but we know it's there. We've all been through it. So, yeah, definitely. The mentorship program in itself has evolved in such a way where initially I felt like maybe 4 or 5 was going to be where we maxed out. But now, what number do you think is going to be appropriate as far as getting them to where they're not oversaturated?
Yeah. I honestly don't know the answer to that because, it's kind of like a rolling thing right now. We don't have it where, it's rolling, so we have people coming in and, graduating from it. I don't know, but I also know personally, and I know Amber's the same way. Both of us are not going to just say, keep bringing people on, keep bringing people on. I want to be a benefit to my mentees as well. So if I'm getting oversaturated and I can't handle the mentorship program, and then I can't also handle my business on top of that, I'm just doing a disservice to everyone, a disservice to myself, a disservice to the team, a disservice to you, and then, of course, my mentees.
Yeah, and you're still in production, which is important. You and Amber both.
Right.
So you guys are in it firsthand. You're in the trenches with them, but it also is important to understand that you have your own business too that you need to focus on.
Correct.
And they can pull you, not like they're intentionally doing it, but obviously if multiple people are tugging on you saying, hey, I need some assistance here, it does pull you away from your highest income producing activities, which is production. So that's definitely going to be a
time
challenge.
blocking is the most important thing.
Totally.
And that's something that we teach all the people in mentorship is that idea of time blocking. We have them send us their schedule every morning just to get into the habit of having everything scheduled. I once read a statistic, and I could be slightly off on the numbers here, but if you write out your schedule every day, you're going to hit 80% of everything that you write down. And if you don't write it down, you'll only hit 20%. And I think it's kind of related to the 80-20 principle. Oh. So I think it's just super important, time blocking.
Totally. Writing down or having a schedule in general, you can challenge an agent, let me see your schedule. And if they can show it to you and they've got time blocks, say, okay, you're probably pretty productive. It's the ones that don't have a schedule or they just have a lot of white space. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have to have your day planned, in my opinion, to be highly productive.
Absolutely.
The highest producers, if you look at their schedule, it's just boom, 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 boom. And it seems like that's very restrictive, but in fact, that's what's going to give somebody the freedom to live their best lives.
Absolutely. Schedule your free time.
Yeah.
It's liberating to schedule your free time.
For sure.
Put on there hey, I'm going to, take 3 hours off to go get lunch with my wife.
Yep.
Look, as long as you do the activities that I know will work, I don't really care when you do them. Maybe don't make your prospecting calls at 11 p.m. because I don't think the people you're calling are going to really appreciate that too much.
Yep.
But ultimately, if you can get everything done, we're all gifted with the same 24 hours in a day.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's important too that we don't tell them what to do. I think this is an interesting piece as well. Whenever you're talking to someone or bringing on an agent, they got licensed for their own reasons. Now, we have certain metrics, we have certain standards on the team. However, we always sit down our new agents and ask, what are your financial hopes and dreams? Right. What do you want to accomplish? And then they'll inevitably give us maybe a dollar amount per year or something like that. And all we're doing is holding them accountable and reminding them of what their goal is. So we're not saying you need to do X, Y, and Z because we're telling you. We're saying you need to do X, Y, and Z because you said, this is what I want to do. And I'm giving you the path. I'm giving you the blueprint to get there. Right. So I'm just holding you accountable to your own standards. I think that's super important because it's really tough to point and say, do this, do that. If it's not something that they're internally driving towards,
absolutely,
they're not going to put the effort for. So I think that's major. One thing I'm super proud of in this company is, and it's I talk to a lot of teams, brokers. The onboarding process to bringing on new agents is probably the biggest challenge, if not the biggest, certainly one of them. Can you walk me through kind of what our onboarding looks like and and what your thoughts are overall of the whole process?
Sure. The TLDR, too long didn't read of my next sentence here is it's tough. It's a grind, but that's what being a real estate agent is. It's not, the glitz and glam that you see on reality TV. I joke, I wish our job was house hunters. Let me show you 3 houses. Let's assign a funny nickname to each house, and then you have to choose one of them, and you have to buy that. And then I know I'm guaranteed to get paid.
Yep.
So our onboarding process, it's broken down really into 6 months, but it's really split from the first 30 days, the next 60, and then the remaining 3 months. That first 30 days, it is pretty much hands off for myself and Amber. Of course, we're there if you absolutely need us, but that's where you're going to be watching a lot of videos. Mike, you've set up this incredible university where you learn all of our systems. You learn our CRM, you learn how to dial, you learn how to speak to people. We teach you how to do open houses, how to, ensure that you're having good quality conversations. You have to read a couple of books, such as Ninja Selling. And it's a lot. I mean, the biggest thing there is mojo. We're going to teach you to hunt. Calling expireds, calling FSBOs. That's how I started my career. And I'll be honest, it sucks. Mm-hmm. But I always tell the mentees, put yourself in the shoes of these expired listings. These are people that had a plan. They wanted to sell their home maybe 6 months ago, maybe a year ago in some of these cases. Yep. And that didn't happen. And then you're one of, 300-400 people calling them that day trying to get a listing. So once you put yourself into like the shoes of the person you're calling and give yourself a little bit more of that perspective, it makes that aspect easier. After you get through that first 30 days, which, like I said, it's a grind, it's a lot. That's when you really officially join, the mentorship program. You'll meet with Amber or myself once a week, usually on Zoom. Once a month, you'll meet with us in person. But you mentioned that we have a group chat through Slack, through one of our Slack channels for the mentors and the mentees, which I think is just an incredible resource in its own. And I wish I had something like that when I started my career. It's just everybody's asking questions, everyone's answering them. And what's really cool to see is the people who have been in our mentorship program for a little while now, they start answering the questions before Amber and I even get a chance to. And that's just really cool to see. Yeah,
it's fun watching that oftentimes. And then the cool thing too, which I take immense pride in, is just because I was dealing with it just like most teams and brokers where, you go through this whole process when you interview an agent and, you have them fill out the DISC profile. For those that don't know, a DISC profile is like a personality test. And for the longest time, I was screening and vetting them, interviewing, looking at the resume. It was very time consuming. And then if I see somebody I like, I bring them on. Okay. And then we start logging it. We start giving them, business cards, team polos. We get them platform access, you name it, which took time and money. Mm-hmm. And resources, okay? And what would happen inevitably was, we would see it after a couple months, either they just didn't want to put the work that was required. Maybe they decided the team model wasn't for them. Maybe there was personal issues within their family that, outside of our control where they're just like, this isn't working, I got to go somewhere else. There's no rhyme or reason for it. Even, in fact, I've had agents that make a ton of money in a span of a couple months and then coast the rest of the couple months.
Right.
So there's really no way of telling who's going to make it and who's not and who's going to be consistent. And that's something you need as a team lead. So what we did put together, and I've gotten some black for it before, but it works. It's our 30-day boot camp. And, basically what you said was first 30 days, you've got to earn it. You don't get anything. You've got to earn that position on the Roland Team. So you've got to go through the online course. The Roland Team University comes with a bunch of quizzes to make sure it's the A to Z proprietary stuff of the Roland Team. Followed by that, you need to do 4 open houses. You got to go door knocking 4 times and log 20 hours of mojo, all within a 30-day period. It is a grind. Admittedly, most of my teammates do not do a ton of mojo, a ton of door knocking after they get past the 30 days because they're busy, with the high, these leads that we generate for them.
Right, of course.
But at the end of the day, we do put a barrier of entry in place to make sure that let's see if you want it. So I said, be damned with all the personality tests, all the scrubbing of the resumes. Let me see if you want it. And then we kind of just figure it out from there. If you make it past the 30 days, cool. I will invest with you. I'll put some time into you as far as giving you, now you get to meet the mentors. Now you're going to have login credentials to all of our platforms, but you got to earn that. And so far it's worked because it really does seem to screen and filter out a lot of people who pretend to want it and those who actually do want it.
Right. And we have so many high value accounts that just to put somebody on that right away. Hey, I want to work for your team. Great. Here you go. Here's, some of the most qualified leads that you can get in the entire city without any form of really knowing, wait, do we even know that they know how to work a lead?
Yeah. Speaking of high quality accounts, we can dive into one, specifically Zillow Flex.
Sure.
What's been your experience? I mean, for those that don't know, Zillow Flex is, obviously most agents know what Zillow is, and most of the public knows that Zillow is like the place where it's the Amazon of real estate searches.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so essentially, like behind the curtains type of stuff, where if you are in lead, or let's just say you're a real estate agent and you want to buy business, the best leads money can buy historically have always been with Zillow. But they're also expensive. Certain zip codes expect to pay over $1,000. That's for a name, number, and email. And sometimes, actually most times, they're not really interested, at least not right away. Sometimes they're just looking for a friend. At the end of the day, you're still on the hook for that $1,000. And so Zillow used to do this model. Now they have been doing a hybrid model to where there's the Zillow Premier Agent where you pay money per lead, and then there's the Zillow Flex where they're only partnering with a handful of teams. We're lucky enough to be one of 8 teams, or we're 11 now. It's been dwindled down to 8. They only partner with select teams. It's invite only. It's exclusive, based off of a team's ability to convert and to scale. And so we're fortunate enough to have that. But there is a high degree of accountability that comes with this, because ultimately our production, our ability to close is the reason why Zillow is making money in this program to begin with.
Right.
So they really are, and rightfully so, up our ass about it. And in turn, I'm up everyone else's ass about it, because it's kind of like a slippery slope.
And then by extension, a sales manager, so am I. And Amber.
Totally.
Right.
So what's been your experience with that too? Because it's like, it's intense, because we're monitored. They listen to our calls. But you and Amber helped out considerably. And since you and Amber have been helping monitor and just lead and train the metrics, really important things that we look for with Zillow, our numbers have skyrocketed, and now we're doing phenomenal within the program. So it's a credit to you and Amber and your leadership there. But what's been your experience like that dealing with the animal of Zillow Flex?
Yeah, look, it flips everything that you learn in real estate school and from your first mentors. Like I said, I've been doing this since 2014. It flips everything that you initially learned on its head. When I first got into the business in 2014, it was, don't get into a car with a buyer unless they're pre-approved, make them sign a buyer brokerage agreement, have a consultation with them first, this, that, and the other. Zillow flips that on its head, and it's correct. We are in a society of wanting things immediately and wanting things now. And Zillow recognizes that. You use the analogy to Amazon. I order something on Amazon. I laugh because sometimes it comes like 4 hours later and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I just ordered this. Yeah. And Zillow kind of has adapted that model. You can press a button on Zillow right now that says, I want to see this home today at 4 p.m. When you press that button, we're the team that picks up the phone, and we're the team that shows you that home at 4 p.m. There's no consultation. There's no pre-approval process. It's, you want to see 123 Main Street at 4 p.m.? Great, let's go. Once you kind of get over that a little bit, especially when, for so long, a completely different business model is like beat into your head. It's been an incredible lead source for everybody on our team. I mean, we are so fortunate that we have this account. And going back to our mentorship program and that 30-day boot camp, that's why a big reason our 30 days is so tough. You have to earn it. This is such an important account. And to your point, Zillow is also checking in on us and making sure that we're, reaching all of these metrics, that we need to make sure that we're not going to jeopardize this account for anything.
Totally. The go and show model. It was something I was doing when I first got started, because I didn't have the book of business. I didn't have the experience. I was just trying to figure it out. So if a lead came along and wanted to see a property, instead of just vetting them, come meet me in my office. Are you pre-approved? All of these questions that are kind of scary for, a lot of these home buyers. I would just go and meet them, because I felt like by getting in front of them, I could develop a little bit of rapport, a little bit of relationship. It's tough over the phone.
And you're doing something that no one else is doing. Everybody else, that's how I was trained. You have to get them into the office. You got to meet with them. You got to have a consultation. You have to have them sign this. You have to have them sign that. You were the agent out there that was probably stealing business from me as a new agent, because you were agreeing to just meet them at 123 Main Street, where I was like, you need to come to my office and we're going to sit in a conference room and it's going to be all stuffy. And
totally. And you would get burned sometimes. I can't even tell you how many times I'd show up and, after, because I would be talking to them, I'd almost be, vetting them on the site and just be, how long you been looking? What's your current living situation look like? What's your, have you already been pre-approved? And sometimes I'll say, no, I'm unemployed. And say, oh, great. Kind of a waste of time here.
I just want to look at pretty houses.
Right.
Okay, cool. That's what Zillow's for. Just look online.
That's right. I'll tell you what, though, more often than not, I wouldn't say more often than not, but on quite a bit, these people that weren't ready they resurfaced a year, 2 years, 3 years later because I was that one agent that decided to meet them, and they've got a good job now. They're already pre-approved. They're ready to go. So a lot of times it's like what you will do that others won't do that'll separate you. And it's not for everybody. I don't care how much business you've done leading up. When I interview people, I'm like, are you okay with going and showing? And a lot of times they're like, I don't feel comfortable with that. I'm like, well, admittedly, it's probably not a good fit.
Right.
That's just how it is. And I'm not going to argue. I mean, I have anecdotal evidence that it does work for me and for the team, but I'm also going to be backed by Zillow and their infinite data. They got way more data than any independent brokerage out there. They'll let you know. Trust me, again, the Flex program exists because they're making money off conversions. They know what works and it works. Go and show. Now, you have to factor in a little bit of your safety. Like, totally understand that. I'm a bigger guy, so I don't worry as much, but I'm not unaware of this fact. So there are protective measures in place that you can. But again, at the end of the day, these are, that's what we do. We show empty houses. It is kind of a vulnerable, kind of a sketchy situation at times. And what kind of boggles my mind too, the agents in large part that refuse to show a property without a pre-approval are the same ones that will sit in a vacant open house for 4 hours, hoping and praying that someone walks in, as if every single person that walks in is going to not have an agent and already be pre-approved.
And give you legitimate information. At least with the Zillow leads, we're getting a valid phone number, whether it's a burn phone or whatever. We're getting a phone number that's going to connect to that person.
Yep. And more often than not, they don't have an agent already. And obviously, there is motivation to see a home. So, typically a lot of times we're closing them at like 8 to 10%. So, in sales and real estate especially, those are, Babe Ruth numbers, by the way. It doesn't seem like a lot, but the industry average is 2%. You're a killer if you're closing 2%. We're doing 8 to 10%, depends on what month. So again, it works. I admit it's not for everybody. And I'm sure some people will comment saying, I would never do that. I know my value. Hey, keep that energy, more for us, to be honest with you.
That's great. Yeah.
So you had talked about, you've been in the industry for 9 years?
9 years, 2014.
I'm sure you've had some, and I know for a fact you have because I've been privy to a lot of the information. You've had some doozies.
I've had, quite a few.
A lot of transactions that just went sideways. Do you want to tell me about one or two maybe favorites or not so much favorites, but yeah.
Well, I did have a full head of hair when I started in this business. I mean, Amber and I talk in the office all the time, especially this year. I feel like every transaction I have, and it's sometimes it's the client on, sometimes it's my client, sometimes it's the client on the other side, sometimes it's the other agent, sometimes it's the lender. Sometimes it seems that there's always something. And I always just keep telling myself, like, it's the real estate gods and they're just trying to humble me. And like, you know what? I'm fucking humble enough. Yeah. All right. I'm bleeding humility. They could stop trying to humble me with some of the shit that I've seen. But for lack of a better term, one of my favorites, I actually know that this is a story that they tell anonymously at Realtor Orientation. One of the instructors there tells it at Realtor Orientation. And I found out when I was telling an agent that I used to work with a number of years ago, this story. And he was like, wait, I know the ending to the story. And I was like, how do you know it? And he was just like, this is how I know it. They told it to me when I got my license. And it's me. I'm the agent that was in the story. So it was a handful of a transaction from the moment I met these people, and I'm actually very close with these people right now. But they wanted, they wanted the unicorn. We're going back to 2018, so prices were also a little bit lower. But they wanted like the 5-bedroom home in Summerlin, gated, for like $350. Which in 2018, that didn't exist. That was still closer to 500,000 in 2018. And there might even be an extra zero now if we look at 2023 prices. But anyway, there was a lot with this transaction. We finally found them a home totally on the opposite side of town from Summerlin, but it checked off all of the boxes and everything made sense. They'd come with their own lender. And I couldn't actually bring them to my lender at the time because the lender that they came with was in the same office as my lender partner. So I couldn't be like, hey, don't use your lender. Use the guy that sits 2 desks away from the one you came with. And they were using Home is Possible, which for those who don't know, Home is Possible is an incredible program that pretty much gives you a grant for a down payment. And if it's with an FHA loan, there's actually a little bit of money left over at the end that you can apply towards your closing costs. We were also able to get some closing costs, pretty much the remainder of the closing costs paid for by the seller. It was a very different market in 2018.
Yeah.
So my buyers were getting this home for free. So we get to the signing table, and I went. They asked me to go to their signing, and they came with their entire family. So there was literally it was the husband, the wife, their 3 kids. One of the kids' girlfriends was there for some reason. And I think one of the grandparents were even there too. So they had to get us into the big conference room. And the lender showed up, which is rare. You don't really see lenders showing up to signings too much. And the signing's about to start, and the lender stands up and she's like, I've prepared a speech. Why would you prepare a speech? I just want to sign, close, get them their keys in, a few hours. So the lender goes on this whole speech about how great this family is and how they're privileged to having been able to work with them and this, that, and the other. And then sits down, and I'm live texting my broker at the time, everything that's going on. And I'm I feel like I'm on a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode right now, or Punk'd, where's Ashton Kutcher? This is wild.
Yeah.
So the escrow officer starts going through the signing with them and says to the buyers, okay, and then this is the remainder of what you owe. Because I think there was actually a little bit that they would have owed at the end. Not a lot, a couple $1,000s, which in the grand scheme of things, to buy a home for a couple $1,000s, find me a rental that's going to only cost you a couple $1,000s with first month, last month security and all the other deposits. So the buyer pauses and goes, no, we're actually supposed to get a credit of $6,000 back. So I jump in and I'm yeah, that's not a thing. You can only get a credit back if it's, equal to or less than your earnest money deposit. And their deposit was maybe $3,000.
Yeah.
So I'm nope, you can't. So the buyer points at the lender and goes, that's not what my lender told me. Lender gets pale. Calmly excuses themselves, walks out the door. There's a little printer room or something next to the conference room that we're in. Goes into this printer room, slams the door, and just starts hysterically crying.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I didn't really know how to handle it. So my buyers are just sitting there with literally their whole family, twiddling their thumbs, what's going on? So the escrow officer assistant gets the head escrow officer. I'm speaking to the head escrow officer. We have no idea what's going on. Meanwhile, the lender's in the closet, hysterical crying. We can all hear it.
Oh my God. So
the escrow officer knocks on the printer room door, and the lender says, go away. Meanwhile, this is, keep in mind, I'm telling you, man, I've literally seen it all.
Yeah.
So the escrow officer, keep in mind, this is the escrow officer's office. So she's being told to go away in her own office. Mm-hmm. She can't even get into her own printer room. I don't really know. The escrow officer actually ended up saving the day here. I guess as they called the mortgage broker agreed to take some of it on their chin or whatever. Anyway, the lender comes back into the signing room after composing themselves. Keep in mind, it's been now about an hour or so because it took time to come to a resolution on this. And then again, right before the signing's about to start, she stands up again and goes, I just want you to know I've saved the day. And then just sits down for the rest of the signing. That was probably it ended up closing. They've lived there now for almost 5 years. I still speak to this buyer from time to time. Super nice family. It was his first time buying a home, so he thought that was a normal thing.
Sure.
So he didn't think twice really of it. To me, it was one of the craziest things that I've ever witnessed. I've told it to a lot of people in our realtor community. Like I said, they tell that story about a lender locking themselves in a closet at signing at the association and CE classes and orientation. So if you ever hear that story secondhand, you could be oh shit. That's Jason.
God.
Yeah.
There are some lunatics in this industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and just my experience, not just real estate agents, escrow officers, lenders, and if you're listening, I do apologize, but you probably know it's true. They're more crazy. 90% of them are absolutely batshit crazy. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them, from what I've seen as well.
You got to be in this industry, man. Yeah, we're all a little batshit crazy.
A little bit crazy, or addiction issues I've seen is very common in this industry. And I think it's just one of those things where if you're for me, for example, like I just can't half-ass anything. If I'm doing something, it's 100%, whether it's good or bad. And it happens to bode well in real estate because it's just like I can dive 100% into it and just like go crazy. But it also can be negative as well. If obviously drugs, alcohol, other things like that. And you see that quite a bit in this industry. It is kind of sad, but a lot of times they're able to control it, the higher producers, and they hone in on real estate and they figure it out. But that doesn't negate the fact that they are a little bit crazy. So that's so funny. I have a kind of one. It's mine was from a client. It was my very first listing. And I was at my initial brokerage, and the photographer I used, we were forced to use him, and he was super pricey, like $400 or $500. And this is my first listing. I haven't made a dime in this industry. $500 8 years ago for me was like a shit ton of money. It's still a lot of money. But it was like, okay, I had to like get
the credit card. $500?
Yes.
For photos?
For photos.
Damn, dude.
I didn't know. I was brand new. And
shit, Virtuance is even like...
Yeah, and now I told for $500, now it's rolling out the red carpet. There'll be a taco truck in the freaking driveway.
Drone footage.
Everything. So but again, because the person had a monopoly on that brokerage and they knew they were price gouging. And again, I didn't know any better. So I took it, I paid the money or whatever, and I had this listing. And I remember this guy, nice enough guy, but I'd always ask for feedback. And it was always the same. He refused to put on pants. This guy would literally go in the backyard. At least he went in the backyard. He'd smoke his cigarettes, but he'd be sitting there in his tighty whities, just sitting there chain smoking, and never sold the house. For obvious reasons.
I mean, he doesn't come with the house.
Yeah, no, I tried.
Maybe he does. I don't know.
I tried to convince him with it. Yeah, it didn't. The feedback was always extremely awkward. But yeah, it sucked because, again, the overhead the money you're spending on marketing, you don't get that back unless it sells, right?
Right.
So I was out that money. It was a costly lesson to vet your sellers a little bit more, to make sure that they're realistic. And also during my listing presentation, I ensure that they're not adverse to wearing pants. So it's super important. That's funny.
It's always awkward when you get that feedback and you have to tell it to your seller, and you're like, don't shoot the messenger. Yeah. Like in your case, wear pants. I had one this year where they were just smoking weed in the house the entire time during showings, and it's legal here. It's fine. I don't care. Do what you want, but please smoke in the backyard. It's legal here. So if you smoke in the backyard, no one can say anything, but your house reeks. And they were like, no, it doesn't. We're not smoking in here. Dude, I saw a bong on your dining room table when I took the listing. Don't lie to me. I don't care. Just stop.
It's emotional. These sellers, you nailed it too. Even if they kind of get mad at the middleman, oftentimes that's why I do the automatic surveys, because when it gets filled out, it gets routed directly to them. So it's not me saying, hey, your house smells like shit. You know what I mean?
Right. Or, hey, you're not wearing pants.
Right. Hey, it's these people that are saying it's valid feedback. But yeah, no, I mean, that's part of being a good agent is you have to balance the emotion of your clients. And sometimes you got to wear kids gloves in order to make sure that you don't upset them, even though it's not your opinion, even though we may share that opinion.
Right.
We do have to let them know that, because it's getting in the way of selling their home.
You hired me to do a job.
Correct.
And, these factors, X, Y, and Z, they might be hindering on that ability. And I'm really good at what I do, but I can't be there. I can't convince a buyer otherwise of their feelings. And if, in your case, if the seller's walking around in their underwear and making a buyer feel uncomfortable, that they don't want to even look at the rest of the house anymore. Or in my case, where they're just smoking weed at the dining room table and just reeking up the home, and they're coming in with kids or elderly people, and they don't want to be around the smoke, and they're just walking out. I can't convince a buyer, well, obviously that seller's not going to be there when you buy the home, because they don't even want to look at the rest of the house anymore.
Yeah, and you nailed it 100%. It's managing people's emotions, and in your situation, it's not just managing clients, but as a mentor, you have to manage just the temperament, the behavior, the attitudes of random individuals. That's something in leadership that there is no book on, that I've seen at least, and that you're not even ready for. You think that you can just kind of roll out a blueprint that just applies to everybody.
And everyone's going to follow it. And they're going to be obviously you're in this position for a reason, so I'm going to listen to you. Managing people and personalities, and no one's the same.
Emotions. Yeah.
Right.
It's the managing of emotions is the most challenging, and having to adapt to each individual person. Because if you're just cookie cutter with everybody, they're going to know it, and they're going to they're going to leave. They're not
put them in a box, and that's it.
Totally. So, I mean, speaking of leadership too, you're very involved with LVR. You want to talk about kind of what that's been like and what your aspirations maybe might look like with that?
Yeah. So, I I really wasn't involved with LVR. That's our association out here for realtors. The Las Vegas Realtors is LVR. And I didn't really get involved until about 2018, just as like a couple committees on as a member. And then I kind of started working my way through like the proverbial ranks, so to speak. I'm a trustee on BORPAC, which is like the political survival fund. And just really ensuring that we're endorsing candidates that doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, it really doesn't matter. It's that they are going to support not only private property rights, but also realtors. We were essential during the pandemic, and that was due to RPAC's efforts. I'm currently the chair of the Political Affairs Committee, where we just educate fellow membership about certain policies that might be taking effect that could hinder homeowners' rights and what we're planning to do about it. And might not even just be that. It might even be something as simple as like we just had somebody from the Clark County Economic Development Office come in to Political Affairs and share what Clark County's plans are for the future and what they plan to do to help bolster the economy and help build up the city best that they can.
What attracted you to that? I mean, because again, I'm ignorant to that. What's the appeal? What's the draw? Just want to make a difference? I mean,
so I graduated from the University of Arizona with a degree in political science, which is as useless as toilet paper when you have a political science degree. And the only thing more useless than a political science degree is probably a psychology degree, which is my minor. So
nice. Double whammy.
Yeah, just like batting 1,000 with that one. So I wasn't going to law school. I thought maybe I would eventually, but I wanted to work for a little while first. I'm a second generation realtor, so got into real estate and then ended up just really liking it. So the idea of maybe doing law school kind of became like a fleeting idea because I found something that I ended up really enjoying. But there was always this desire and want to explore a little bit about what I studied. Because, when you're in college, you can study whatever you want. And political science is not the easiest major. I mean, I had probably wrote, 10, 15, 20 page papers like once every 2-3 weeks. Like that is not an easy degree to just decide to go and get. So when I started discovering that the association had these types of committees that I can get involved with to, whet that political palate, so to speak, it really was, like a perfect fit for me to be able to do real estate, which was something that I was developing a really strong love for, but also still be able to be involved somewhat on a political level, as that was, always a passion.
Yeah, and it's super important, like you mentioned, as far as, for example, during COVID, how real estate agents were considered essential.
And we weren't originally.
I mean,
we
honestly,
got in front of the governor at the time and said, you will kill the economy completely if you shut real estate down.
Can you imagine all the real estate agents if we were just not considered essential? I mean, what would we do?
I probably wouldn't be sitting here right now. I would have had to find something else to do. Totally. I would have needed to pay my bills somehow.
And the idea that a real estate agent is essential is kind of laughable. The idea, in general, like I wouldn't consider a real estate someone who shows home essential, but like in terms of like what that could have done to us as an industry,
we're an arm of financial services at the end of the day, where you have to. Real estate does stimulate the economy.
Yeah, and people don't, and I didn't get that either. Like the importance of what it is as far as just those type of committees or positions and how they get in front of the right people and make these things happen. I'm just over here just trying to sell houses.
Right.
I didn't even know that that's some impact, and I'm thankful that it worked out because obviously it saved. I mean, I can guarantee you the team, just everything would not be in place how it is now if y'all didn't get that figured out. That's major.
It was major.
You mentioned that you're a second generation real estate agent. So your mom or dad?
My dad.
Your dad's a real estate agent? Okay, where's he at?
He's at Coldwell Banker. So He's here in town.
Okay, very cool. I've met him before. He's a really nice guy. So what's that like? Did you grow up where you were like, I'm going to be a real estate agent someday? Or?
So he actually wasn't a real estate agent until later in life. Okay. Like a lot of people, it's a second career, and that's how it was for my dad. When he became a real estate agent, I didn't really know too much about real estate agents except for, reality TV. And it was never something I was interested in. I remember going to college when I would be home from college rather. And, I'd be like hanging out with my dad and we'd go to his office and people at his office were like, oh, when you graduate, are you going to, join us here? I was like, absolutely not. Not at all. No chance. Yeah. And I feel like you speak to a lot of like the second and third generation realtors, especially here in town. They all say the same thing. Like none of them really thought that they were going to get into it. I kind of fell into it. being a realtor. But yeah, no, to answer that question, I didn't think I was going to get into it right away.
Is real estate ever a first option? I don't know anybody where it has.
I don't know.
I kind of fell into it myself. Most people I talk to and most real estate agents, that's not really where their career path is. It's almost like a joke. I saw a funny TikTok where like, I think she was a Cabana girl and she was crying like, I don't know, because she was getting to the point where like, okay, I'm not going to be a 30-year-old Cabana girl, 35-year-old Cabana girl. I guess now the next step in life is to get your real estate license.
Right.
Which is true. Like that's true.
Absolutely, especially in this town.
That's the most popular side hustle in the world. Every bartender, barista, and Cabana girl has their real estate license. And so, yeah, it is interesting. That seems to be the transition, but it always was a backup plan. I was fortunate that I stumbled into it. Like honestly, previously I was a bartender or a night like security manager at like a nightclub out here called Stoney's. So I had zero experience other than buying the home that I did live in with my wife. We ended up selling it, but like that was my experience with real estate, was just purchasing that home. And then the one person that helped me kind of with that transition was the person that I ended up working for 2 years. Really nice guy. But like, I didn't know anything. I didn't know any better. I stumbled into it. And luckily I kind of figured it out along the way. But it is interesting how real estate isn't one of those things where people focus in on like, I don't know anybody. It's like when they're a kid and I want to be a real estate.
I want to be a realtor. Yeah, no, not at all. I was like, I'm going to be a lawyer. And then like that was, I mean, my joke is, and it's still my joke. My wife knows this, is that my dream job that I'm not qualified for is a college basketball coach.
Yeah. Nice.
But you can't just like, you can't stumble into that, but you can very easily stumble into real estate.
Very, very much so. Yeah. It's an interesting gig to say the least. Let me ask you something. If your pops was already in real estate, why didn't you work with him?
So I started my career there.
Okay.
So I started my career working. So he was the sales manager of that Coldwell Banker office at the time. So he wasn't really like focused on building a team. He was doing his business and then being a sales manager, assisting the branch manager running that office. So I started my career there, and it was not. I did not really. I failed. I'll call it what it is. I failed my first go at it. If you look on my desk next to my computer, I have a Post-it note that says $753,000. That's how much volume I sold in my first 12 months of real estate, which, you know, with splits and everything, I think that worked out to like $7,000 in my pocket.
Yeah.
After taxes, I was probably negative dollars because we have a lot of fees and everything that we pay to be a real estate agent. So, yeah, I guess I don't know. I think it was a combination of my dad wanted somebody else at the company to train me because he wanted it to come from like a third party, not from my dad. So because he was too close to me, obviously. And I think it was also a combination of me just not really having the grit that's required. I was a 22-year-old kid, just graduated college, living in Vegas now. I'm from New York, so I didn't know anybody. And yeah, I think it was just, I wasn't ready. That's really what it was. I wasn't ready to be who I was capable of. I did not think I was going to be a real estate agent, but in 2014, the job market was absolutely horrific, especially here in Las Vegas.
Yep.
So it was like a default thing, and there's probably a little bit of resentment on my side that like this is where I ended up. So I worked for a builder for then a couple of years after that. Did really well working for a builder and learned a lot there. I think it was also good being a little separated from my dad at that time. I was able to develop my own person, so to speak. I wasn't just his son now. I was, Jason who works for a builder. And then I decided to try being a realtor again. And I went to work for a friend of mine who he had already had a brokerage, but he was really starting to develop a team at that point. And I was like, because I thought maybe do I go back, and work with my dad? And I was like, you know what? I think I need to continue. Like for me, for my own personal journey, for my own path, I think I need to separate from that a little bit and go my own way. So I did that. That was 5.5 years ago now. And so, like failing forwards, so to speak.
Totally.
I had to fail first miserably.
Yeah.
And it's still a reminder. Like I know where I started. That's why I keep that Post-it note on my desk. It's 2 reasons. One is it's a goal to myself to always have more impending escrows than that number of 753.
Yep.
But it's also to remember, like, to stay humble.
Totally. I do something similar in regards to like my weight loss transition where I've showed it before on the podcast, but like I've got like 40 stickers of when I first started and I was 350. I'm just sitting in my underwear and you can see my face. I'm just looking miserable. I'm bloated and so I'll put it everywhere. You know, it's a reminder. And like, is it healthy? I don't know, but it is important to know where you came from and like that, let that be your compass. Like don't harp on it. Don't dwell on it because it's in the past.
Absolutely.
But it is important to have like a benchmark as far as where you came because there's this book called The Gap in the Gain, lost it there for a bit, and where people focus too much on, you know, where they feel like they're struggling in the past couple of weeks or they don't really look at the bigger picture. When the reality is if you just figure out your benchmark from me or for you, whatever, you know, was the weight and to see where I'm at now and make all the progress. Because we really can beat ourselves up if you have a bad week, a bad month. But if you really have a benchmark and you continue to focus on it, what that looks like and all the progress you've made up to that point, it's that much easier. So no, I totally agree with you on that. What brought you out from New York? Because you had mentioned, how old were you?
So my parents moved here when I graduated high school. So I was 18. I then went to the University of Arizona for 4 years, graduated college, broke college grad, as most of us are after college. And home was then Vegas. Like that's if I wanted a place to live and to start my life and not have to pay rent right away. I had my parents' house, so that was Henderson. And that's kind of what landed me here. And I'll be honest, I always thought Vegas was also going to, like, I thought real estate was going to be a placeholder. I also thought Vegas was going to be a placeholder. But then I really hit my stride with real estate and really started enjoying real estate. And then I met my wife out here and I've developed roots. Like this like Vegas is my home. And I've now been here about 13 years. And it's getting to a point now when people ask me where I'm from, I don't always add originally New York, even though the first 18 years of my life were.
Yeah. No, it's Vegas is interesting. We could talk about just the experience of living in Vegas. And for people that aren't aware, whenever you say you live in Vegas, a lot of times they assume we're living in the casinos or we're like on the strip. Like that's all that we have. That's not the case, as you well know.
Like 2.5 million people live here. We're not all on that strip.
Totally. Like, what is your opinion as far as just like, because you've been around, like Vegas compared to like, in New York, what does that look like and what's your preference?
I mean, I miss the green. I miss trees and grass and rolling hills. I don't know, Vegas, people don't realize this, but like I just said, Vegas does have a population of about 2.5 million. People don't realize how big our population is over here. But yet at the same time, it still feels a lot smaller and closer than that. We used to be no further than 20 minutes from anything. Now we're about 30 minutes as the city keeps growing. But still, I can't compare Vegas to New York. They're two very different animals.
For sure.
Growing up on Long Island, I grew up 30 minutes from the ocean. I grew up going in the summers, going to the beach all the time. Yeah. And I can go to the beach here, but it's, a 4-hour drive, which is still not bad. But I don't know, it's very different. New York is much more spread out. Vegas, we're kind of just this like little bubble over here. And then there's really nothing else around us. You go 4 hours in one direction, you'll be in Phoenix, which is its own little desert bubble. And you go 4 hours in the other direction and you're in LA.
Yeah, Vegas is super interesting. I pretty much born and raised out here. When I was 8 months, moved out here. So I always tell people born and raised. And, people you go to high school with, once they graduate, they're like, I hate this place. I'm getting out of here. And they would end up going someplace for a year or two. Inevitably, like 95% of them come back. I was one of them as well. I went to Chicago for a couple of years. I went to Fresno for a couple of years, and I always came back. And honestly, outside of like the school districts being a little bit funky out here, and the weather, of course, it's awesome. Like there's so many things to do. You got to deal with 115 degree where you feel like your face is melting. It's ridiculous, and you never get used to it.
Never.
But like
it's a dry heat. Like shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up. Yeah. Totally. It's terrible.
It's 115 degrees out. It's hot.
Yeah. It instantaneously puts you in a pissed off mood and like drains you of any energy that you had. Like I got to start taking naps at around 1:32 just to recharge because it's so fucking hot. So yeah, I hear you on that. But like, man, if you want to have a steak dinner, some lobster tail, and a Corona at 2 a.m, you've got a bevy of options for it.
And there's so many unique neighborhoods here. Yeah. Like you can catch my wife and I a lot of times in the Arts District, which I call the most unlike Vegas neighborhood in Vegas. It's all single level, like it's like all single level street. There's restaurants and bars, no gaming.
Yeah.
So you go to any of the bars or restaurants there, you're not going to find a slot machine. You're not going to find that poker machine.
Yep.
You got the Fremont area. There's so much in the city that like you don't. People ask how often do you go to the Strip? Like, I don't, unless it's like my birthday or my anniversary and we're going to get a nice dinner somewhere.
Or families in town.
Or families in town. And they're like, let's go to Gordon Ramsay. Like, fine, we'll go to Gordon Ramsay. Great. Just can you give me like more than 2 months notice, please, so we can actually get a reservation?
Right. Totally true. Yeah. And with Vegas growing too, it's been crazy. Like, obviously, you know, that leads to our real estate prices kind of skyrocketing like they did. But in addition, like we get the Raiders now, you know, we've got a couple other things happening.
Golden Knights, they just won the Stanley Cup. Like, I had chills. I was tearing up.
Yeah.
My wife was laughing when I was watching the final game and we won, and I was tearing up, and I was like, this team means so much to me. Like, this is my city now. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when they were announced, everyone laughed. We now are the champions.
Yeah.
Like, Stanley Cup's the hardest trophy to win in sports.
It's super cool.
They lifted a city.
Yeah. No,
you know?
They 100% did. And I was a little bit trepidatious. I didn't think that Vegas would really rally and get behind him, to be honest with you, because I was at I played a little ball. I didn't play, but I redshirted there. So I was affiliated with the UNLV football team. And I remember just like looking around during some of our home games. I'm like, man, you don't get any local support out here. Now that's, anecdotal to UNLV in particular, but I used to think that was also just Vegas in general. Like, it was kind of a shallow city to where they just didn't really have the heart of a fan base required in order to really get behind a team. But I was proven wrong there. And it's interesting because they did it with the Golden Knights. Now, it remains
the WNBA teams did it too.
Yeah, what was it, Aces?
The Aces.
Yeah. And then you got, obviously we have the Raiders now. We're getting a baseball team.
Yeah, allegedly we're getting the A's. It's also a really badly kept secret that we're probably getting an NBA team. So all of a sudden, this little transient town of Vegas that, professional sports won't work in, we're about to have the Big Four.
Yeah, wild. And it's really cool to see the city kind of rally behind it.
It's amazing.
You
had front row seats.
Yeah. Oh, it's the coolest thing. So now we got pretty much everything that a big city has. It's been really fun to watch. And I think I'm blessed to be in Vegas. Again, the school districts, now that I have a kid, is something where I'm like, you got to figure it out. But charter schools, private schools, you can work around it, or homeschool, kind of that's the direction I'm leaning as well.
Right.
Just because. But anyways, awesome, man. Well, it was really fun having you on. I really appreciate having you.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. You were wonderful. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Awesome.
Sweet.